That's a really good question. Well, I'll answer the first part first, though. It was pretty seamless for me because I'm not actually sure if Medill, the journalism school at Northwestern, still does it this way. But if you want to focus in political journalism, you can do a quarter or two of your school year in DC. And at the time, this was before local news unfortunately got completely hollowed out. But local outlets that couldn't afford to keep on a full-time staffer but wanted to have someone speaking for them in DC would work with the school, and a graduate student would file stories for them. So my first job on the Hill was actually while I was in school for the Biloxi Sun Herald. I wrote a lot of defense appropriation stories about procurement, and learned really quickly I didn't want to cover the Pentagon. But yeah, I mean, it was seamless in that respect. And I will say I never ever felt awestruck by the politicians themselves. But one thing that's really beautiful, and I know I'm not alone in feeling among people who've stayed in the Hill press corps, is I never lost my veneration for the building and for the Hill and for the culture. You know, I feel, and I feel so strongly that hasn't left me or faded at all, that there is no better job in journalism, because unlike the White House, where you're really working the phones a lot and otherwise kind of just like trapped in this briefing room, dependent on how things go with the person in front of the podium, reporting from the Hill, there are just the newsmakers walking around all the time. And yes, it's not always easy to know where to stand, but if you can stand in the right place and if you can be human and just sort of earn their trust, the news is just there. You don't even really have to work hard for it on a certain level, if you know what I'm saying. You do, but you don't. You're just in it all the time. And that is such an addictive, intoxicating environment that I just sort of said, hey, I'm never leaving. To your question, though, about the politicians themselves, I wasn't really starstruck in the beginning. What I think, was overly deferential and antagonistic at turns. When I was a young reporter, if it was John McCain, I would be like, right, okay, sir, thank you so much, sir. Not in an awestruck way, just I wanted to be very formal. And then if it was like a younger lawmaker, I would kind of try to spar and get some news. It took a while, it took years for me as a younger journalist to figure out that the secret to connecting with lawmakers and getting them to open up is actually just being yourself and taking a breath. And sometimes you spend 2 or 3 conversations with a lawmaker where your recorder is on, but it's not news because you're like talking about a sports game or where they took their kids apple picking. And then, the third time they're going to give you news because they know that it's not totally transactional. You're a human being who's having a conversation. And that can be hard, I think, for some people to digest, because there's this stereotypical assumption that, like, okay, they're public figures, they earn taxpayer money, they should just tell you what's going on right away. But they don't. So I hope that answers both questions.